You virtually today. Still excited for when we can actually be in person together. But love this opportunity to be able to actually share stories from our partners in other parts of the country. If we're going to be in this Zoom world, we might as well take advantage of the expertise and lessons learned of others who have walked this path before us. So this is the first of four workshops for our Leadership Summit. And we are excited today to actually bring life to our 5% campaign. You've heard us mention it many times, whether you're at a leadership summit or seen an email. But we felt that one of the great ways to allow you to think about what this could mean for your communities would be to actually listen to other communities who have launched their own 5% campaigns and really put into action, and the transformational impact that that has. To get us started today, we are bringing back Deb Markley. So if any of you joined us a year and a half ago in person for our last in-person annual reception, we had Deb speak when we first announced the results of that transfer of wealth study that we completed, and did such an incredible job bringing it to life. And what this could mean for our community. So we brought Deb back to say a few words, and then she will introduce our partners from Nebraska Community Foundation, and they will in turn share their story. So it's my honor to introduce to you Deb Markley, who is the Senior Vice President of Locus Impact Investing. She brings more than 35 years of experience in community economic development and community philanthropy. And through the transfer of wealth work, Deb is an advocate for really rooting local wealth as a resource for driving sustainable, equitable prosperity in our communities. So it's truly my honor to turn this over to Deb, and just wishing you all a great day. And thank you so much for joining us today. Deb.
Thank you, Shelley. Thanks. It's great to be back with you. Would be better to be in person. Obviously, I enjoyed my last visit, but thank you for having me come back. If you want to bring up the slides, that would be great. Are they visible yet? Just want to make sure. I'm going to spend very little time just providing a bit of a introduction and overview to this phenomenon of transfer of wealth. So I want to address this question of 5% for what, as an intro to the stories that you're going to hear from our friends in Nebraska. So next slide, please. My colleagues have been doing transfer of wealth analysis for almost 2 decades now, and there are a few things that we know for certain. The first is that this region, your region, has wealth, and we know that because of all the work we've done across the country. Every region has a degree of wealth. The second thing we know is that wealth is transferring across the generations. It's part of the life cycle. You build your wealth, you pass it on to the next generation. The third thing that we know is that without some action now, that wealth, or at least some of that wealth, is likely to follow your children, your grandchildren, your opportunities that lie outside the region, because in many cases, your kids aren't living where you are right now. And the final thing is that we know that you can capture and invest some of that wealth to ensure prosperity for all parts of this region. And we know that because others have done it, and this region can too. So let me talk a little bit about the transfer of wealth in the region that's served, the 20-county region that's served by the Innovia Foundation. The current net worth in your region is $293 billion. It's a big number. It's really all the assets that you have in the region, the homes, the businesses, the investments, minus any of the liability or debt against it. So you have a significant amount of current net worth or wealth in the region. Next slide. It's estimated that $41 billion of that current net worth is estimated to transfer in the region from one generation to the next over the next 10 years. So as folks pass on, their estates are settled, $41 billion is going to be transferring across the generations. Next slide, please. If just 5% of that transfer, 5% of that $41 billion was actually designated for your communities, if folks, as they were doing their estate planning, said, we want some of this wealth to stay here in this region, over $2 billion could be invested in new endowments in the region to positively impact the region for generations to come, not just today, but over time. Next slide. And if you did that, if you captured that 5% into endowments, it would provide over $100 million in annual grant making in just 5 years. Now, all of these are, next slide, big numbers. And as we've done this work over 20 years, it's a little hard sometimes to wrap your hands around those numbers. But let me just share 4 takeaways from this analysis that was done, not just for your region, but across the country. The first is that it's not about the money, it's about the dream. And again, it's an easy throwaway line. It is about the money. We're emphasizing how much could be done with that additional money, but it's really about what it makes possible in your communities when you have access to those additional philanthropic dollars that are reinvested, if you will, invested back into your communities through endowment building and the grant making that it provides. What are the things that you could tackle if you had those resources? Any place can do this. And we've seen this in urban and rural communities across the country. But I think what's really important to share with you all is that it's happening in your region already. And I just want to give you 2 examples. The Leadership Council in Northeast Washington has already established the Northeast Washington Community Fund. It was seeded initially by a donor, but it's allowing that council to begin to take action to capture some of this wealth into the community fund over time. The Upper Clearwater Leadership Council, which is one of the most rural in your region, has established a fund that's been seeded by gifts from every council member as a start. So 2 different paths, but 2 different councils that are already taking steps to do just 5% in their communities. The third takeaway is having access to this resource really gives you the dollars, gives you the resources you need to build the fund that your place needs. It gives you the opportunity to have a pool of resources so that you can answer the question, 5% for what? For your community. This isn't about the bigger vision for the foundation, Innovia Foundation as a whole. What can you do in your community? And it gives you the resources to build the fund that you really need to make change happen in your community. And finally, there's no time like the present. You'll see through the stories you're going to hear in just a minute. You can set goals, you can make progress, you can start small, but you can start. And that's going to be a real theme as we talk over the next hour, that this is about motivating you to get ready to take some action. So I want to bring up this last slide because this is a map of Nebraska and shows their most recent transfer of wealth analysis, and they'll speak more to this. But you are so fortunate to have the folks from Nebraska Community Foundation and several of the community funds with you today, because Nebraska has truly been the pioneer in doing the transfer of wealth analysis. It was the first state to do the analysis and particularly to focus on the rural transfer of wealth that was happening in Nebraska. And Jeff Yost, the CEO of the Nebraska Community Foundation, was really a strong leader and advocate in getting that initial analysis done. So I am going to get out of the way. I wanted to just set the stage for you all to see that you have transfer of wealth happening, you've got that wealth, and I want to introduce now Jeff Yost with the Nebraska Community Foundation to introduce the wonderful storytellers that have been invited here today. So thank you, Jeff.
Deb, thank you. It's really an honor to be here today, and we love the opportunity to tell some of what we've learned and to share all the things we've yet to learn. So today I'm going to kind of go through some of the context of the Nebraska Community Foundation, some of the context of our transfer of wealth work, how we've used our asset-based community development process to really help communities to build themselves. And then we have leaders from 3 different affiliated funds, the Nebraska Community Foundation Network. Each of these folks are either currently on the statewide board of directors or previously on the statewide board of directors. And then I also want to thank my colleague, Carrie Malik Madani, for helping us put lots of this together. So I want to start with this slide, and this is all about dreams that are possible and dreams achieved. Rural America today has a greater opportunity to really have a rural renaissance than it's had in decades and decades. The advent of information technology, just these massive changes in the economy. The community economic development question today isn't one of jobs, it's one of why here. Why do I want to live and work and raise my family in this community? And that puts rural communities in a really good spot in terms of thinking about this. But one of the big things we have to work on is, what is our individual self-fulfilling prophecy in our communities? And collectively, what is our community self-fulfilling prophecy? So that's so much of what we're doing here, is trying to help people dream big dreams, but also have the confidence and the optimism that dreaming those dreams is very possible, and those dreams can become real. So why don't you go to the next slide, please? So we start with this. We don't start with what we don't have, we start with what we do have. Nebraska is absolutely blessed with abundance. Growing up in a small town, I was surrounded by people that loved me. I had a big extended family, but lots and lots of other people that loved me as a child. That's huge. That is a huge thing. That's an enormous amount of abundance. So one of the things we really embrace is everything we need is right where we are, and everything and everyone in Nebraska works. So next slide. So the transfer of wealth is an interesting manifestation of this, right? Nebraska is about 77,000 square miles, so it's a huge geographical space, primarily an agricultural place, about 1.9 million people, most of whom live in the eastern third of Nebraska, and most of those folks are in the metropolitan areas of Lincoln and Omaha. That being said, there's 531 towns in Nebraska. 70% of those are smaller than 500 people. So there's lots and lots of small towns and huge spaces, right? So lots of those communities have healthcare facilities, they have education and schools. You know, there's lots of things that we have to sustain and continue. The counties in red is where the transfer of wealth is happening most rapidly. Those are places that are primarily sparsely populated, and they have seen that out migration of the next generation over time. So that's why the transfer of wealth is peaking in those places now. That being said, the transfer of wealth in Nebraska is huge. There's 1.9 million people, over $600 billion is going to be transferred from one generation to the next. So that really puts the opportunity in front of us. Next slide, please. The Nebraska Community Foundation is, you know, we've built our system based upon our culture. So Nebraskans have a very, very proud tradition of local control, a very proud tradition of building and sustaining our communities. So everything we've done is really to work through that. So we're constantly in the process of building up and supporting community leadership, helping people dream big dreams, helping those plans to become real, and then thinking about the next part of that. This map illustrates all the different places where there's an NCF affiliated fund. All of our system is a willing partner system. So we want to work with people who want to work with us. And we've been lucky to have thousands and thousands of people make that choice to do that work with us over time. Next slide, please. The leadership of those affiliated funds is all volunteers. So there's about 1,500 Nebraskans that are volunteer fund advisory committees of the Nebraska Community Foundation, all of these affiliated funds. There's affiliated funds in nearly every county in Nebraska. The Nebraska Community Foundation itself is not a grant maker. All of our grant making actually happens through our affiliated funds, with the idea that the Nebraska Community Foundation is here to be a value-added partner. We're here to help you go further, faster than you might be able to go as a group of community volunteers. And then we have this enormous network of people where we do lots and lots and lots of peer learning, visit one another's communities, really build deep relationships with one another to think about what's possible. The number that I'm most proud of on this sheet is those 45,000 donors. We've had 45,000 gifts to affiliated funds in the last 5 years. That's lots and lots of people investing in the future of their hometown, right? And that's all the stuff that's sort of proof of concept of engaging people, asking them to act, and then co-producing their future. So next slide, please. Like we talked about with the transfer of wealth, I mean, really, the leading economic indicator here was the loss of young people. The lagging economic indicator was really the loss of the wealth. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But as we think about the work of the Nebraska Community Foundation, it's all about helping hometowns to become more magnetic and attracting people who have always lived there, stayers. People who grew up in these places, maybe went off to school, had some global experiences, but they want to return home to raise their family. And then, of course, newcomers. How do we attract stayers, returners, and newcomers to be in community with us? Given the community economic development question of today of it's not about jobs, it's about why here. We really have to figure out all those things that it's going to take for young families to choose to be in community with us. Next slide, please. And again, all of our work is within an asset-based context. The primary thing we want to help happen through an asset-based context is make all the goodness visible. In rural places in particular, we tend to be very humble and we don't talk about all the good stuff as much as we should. So part of this is actually empowering and inspiring people to talk about the goodness, but then having lots and lots of people around the table. Because with this premise, every community has more potential resources than any one person knows. That's always true. So these are some of the principles we use and some of the keys to an asset-based approach. It's about abundance, not scarcity. It's about opportunities, not deficiencies. It's all about the act of inviting people to be in conversation with us and to co-create good outcomes. Almost all of the progress is incremental, and that's really good because that creates change that sticks. All of our practice is community-led and community-owned because the only people that can build and sustain a community are the people that live and work in it. It's all relationship-based, and you need to build those relationships before you need them. You can't start a relationship by asking somebody for something. It has to be mutually beneficial. It's really important to understand how people belong to something, and people belong to something through having their gifts and talents received and appreciated. And then finally, volunteer associations in our communities are incredibly powerful, incredibly essential element of building community in our places. Next slide. So when we use an asset-based approach like this is how we find power when we're doing it together. This is how we build power. Once we've done that, we begin to exercise power, not just to take advantage of opportunities, but to address key issues and to dream bigger dreams. Next slide. Okay, so two quick things here. So we've been doing this work. I came to work for the Nebraska Community Foundation in 1998. I was the first full-time employee there, and the foundation was incorporated a few years before that. So we've been keeping a lot of data for many years. As you can see, community-based endowment building started quite a while ago. So by 2010, we had 86 funds and there was some endowment, but then there were quite a few people that began to do something in their estate planning. So you combine those two things together, you had $50 million. By 2015, there was some progress. And then between 2015 and 2020, we've seen enormous progress because people understand endowments. They understand the payout from endowments. They understand these are ways to sustain and really add value to our places. So as you can see, planned gifts have continued to be pretty sustainable because they're sort of an evergreen thing, right? You're creating new planned gifts, but as people pass away, those planned gifts become endowments. So you're trying to encourage more people to do that. So you can sort of see the numbers. And then the next slide. So mission fulfillment for the Nebraska Community Foundation is really to help communities build an unrestricted endowment for their place. So an unrestricted endowment is a permanent fund that is designated for a particular geography, but doesn't have any purpose beyond that. And volunteer affiliated fund leaders are the decision makers of how that payout is spent. One of the key things we talk about in our strategic framework is how would we use the payout from unrestricted endowments to create change in our places that otherwise may not occur. So you can see the numbers have gone up dramatically. The part of this slide that I like the most is there's now 46 different community-based affiliated funds that have at least $10,000 a year of discretionary payout. And 15 of those now have $50,000 a year. And we're going to hear from some of those folks here in the next few minutes. I want to introduce the first of the three affiliated fund leaders, Richard Walter from SHICKLEY. Richard was on the board of the Nebraska Community Foundation for 9 years. Richard and I have probably known each other for 20 years. Richard has been all over the country talking about SHICKLEY and the amazing community economic development story of SHICKLEY and how they've used philanthropy to build and sustain their place. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Walter.
Looks like you're on mute, Richard.
Can you hear me now?
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for being here.
Okay. So I'm here today to talk about the SHICKLEY Community Foundation and what we've accomplished in SHICKLEY over the years, much because of our affiliation with the Nebraska Community Foundation and the wonderful training and support they give us locally. As I said, the population of SHICKLEY is 341 people. We consider our community our school district. So actually there's about 630 people in our school district. We've worked hard over the years. We were founded in 1991, which is prior to the Nebraska Community Foundation, but we've been affiliated with NCF since 2002. Next. So the SHICKLEY Community Foundation, we have $2.5 million in total assets. We have $2.2 million in our unrestricted endowment, and we've reinvested in the community over $600,000 through our grant program. We have made a significant effort to we've met face-to-face with every household in this SHICKLEY school district. And this has helped to get our name out, and it's helped to get our story out. And as we've granted this money into the community and people see what can be accomplished with an unrestricted endowment, our numbers just keep growing. Next. The number one organization that benefits from our unrestricted endowment is our school district. Our school district is the number one priority of the community. We do surveys every 2 years of the community, and every survey that we've done since 1988 has come back saying keeping our K-12 school is the number one priority of the community. Our grant making also goes to the summer recreation program in SHICKLEY. We do a lot of work with the volunteer fire department, our EMTs. Probably our most impactful grant has been helping get daycare in SHICKLEY and early education. These are run by the school. It's part of our school system, so the people working in daycare and working in early education are employees of the school district, which has made it very, very well run, and people are well compensated, and it's been a great boon to our community. And we see that with the number of young families that want to move to town. We've recently just opened a new subdivision that's going to provide, when it's completely full, will provide 18 new homes for the village of Shickley. Next. So the transfer of wealth in Shickley, our 10-year transfer of wealth is almost $13 billion. So the 5% of the 10-year transfer of wealth in Shickley is close to $650 million. Next. So what we've done with our fund in Shickley right now, we have 12 expectancies, and that is going to provide at some point in time about $2 million to our unrestricted endowment. We now have $2.5 million in endowed assets. So we have right at $4.5 million in our total accounts in what we expect to receive and what we have on hand. So Shickley has achieved 696% of their 10-year transfer of wealth goal. We're very proud of that fact, and we continue to work to increase that as we go along. Next.
Yeah, so Richard, this is Jeff. Just a quick question for you before we go on to the next one. Carrie, would you go back one, please? So you guys have been incredibly committed to having a really excellent school district, and you've extended that with early childhood education. Would you guys talk a little bit about the leadership that's gone into that and how your grant making has constantly sort of served as a value add for the school district?
Well, that's something that Joe Kemley, who's been on our fund advisory committee for a long time, and has always said the school district is our #1 customer. We do a lot of grants to the school district, and basically our grants are for things that enhances the curriculum of the Shickley School District. We're not interested in funding registration fees for FFA conventions or FBLA conventions. We're interested in adding things to the curriculum that just enhances the experience of the students. We've done a lot of work with iPads. We built a greenhouse for the VOAG program. Of course, like I said before, the daycare and the early education center. This is a big issue in a lot of communities in Nebraska. You work on workforce development and whatnot, but it's hard for people to work if there isn't daycare available for their youngsters that aren't in school yet. And we were lucky to have a superintendent about 5-6 years ago who bought into this concept, took it and ran with it, and was able to convince the school board that the school should run the daycare and should run the early education center.
And Rich, I just think that's a terrific testament to you guys, the Fund Advisory Committee in Shickley. You're always thinking about what's next. And you're always having conversations in your community about what are the things we can be doing to set ourselves up for success. So you've done that within the context of early childhood development.
Well,
you've done that in the context of housing, really important stuff.
Because, right, we put, like I said, 600 some thousand back in the community. And we've done some things in Shickley that 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't even dreamed of thinking about doing because we didn't have the funding to take advantage of some opportunities that we've had. And this is one thing when we meet with people and are talking to people about the foundation and what we're trying to do, there's going to be many opportunities down the road. We don't know what those opportunities are, but we do know if we have the funding available, that we'll be able to take advantage of those opportunities and make those opportunities not just a dream, but a reality.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. Quick note that I wanted to make. Aaron sent me a quick note and said, make sure everybody knows what an expectancy is. So on a prior slide, we had planned gifts. And expectancy is just somebody including this charity, their affiliated fund or the Innovia Foundation, whatever the case is, in their will or the beneficiary designation of a retirement account or an insurance plan, that kind of thing. So that's what an expectancy is. The next story we want to lift up here is from Keel Vanderveen in Nebraska City. Keel is currently on the statewide board of the Nebraska Community Foundation, has been a fund advisory committee leader in Nebraska City for many years during his adult life. But I think he's also going to tell us about some context within his teenage years. So we're really lucky to have Keel here. Keel and his wife just have their first baby. So Keel, welcome. Thanks for coming and talking to us.
Thanks for the introduction, Jeff. I am from Nebraska City, born and raised. I moved away for college and made the choice to come back. And I always make it a point to emphasize it was a choice. So Nebraska City is a town of 7,300 people, give or take. And our story is really a story of engagement and impact. So I'd first like to share why that choice was made in my case, and how the community foundation and a locally controlled endowment influenced that choice. So as a young high school student in, let's see, junior year, so 17 years old, this would have been back in 2007, 2008, approximately 8-9 years after our fund was established. The affiliated fund leaders decided to create a youth advisory committee. So engage the young people in town, and they offered us a challenge grant. I think it was $1,000 or $2 and said, hey, we'll match you dollar for dollar if you go out and raise that. Well, that did a couple really important things for me and the group of realistically friends I forced to do this with me. It taught us a few lessons. First, it taught us that we can make an impact in our community no matter what our age was. And that impact can be felt and it can be seen, and it makes a difference, not just now, but long term. Second, we learned that it's a lot easier to sell an idea to raise money than to sell cookies or car washes. Quite frankly, it was incredible when we started going out to set lunch meetings with community members and say, gosh, this is what we'd like to do. Would you like to support it? We didn't get told no. That's a pretty powerful thing for a young person to learn. So after going to college, chose to return back to Nebraska City, and even with more attractive job opportunities elsewhere, purely for the reason of being able to be involved and have that impact. So the Nebraska City Community Foundation has historically focused on investing in people. So we do not grant to things like buildings, structures, equipment. That is largely taken care of through a number of large family foundations in town. So we wanted to fill the gap between those family foundations and create a tool for our current residents that cannot or don't have the capacity to make a $20 or $30 million family foundation private to participate in making Nebraska City a better place to live and work. So what does that mean to invest in people? We helped create an endowment to support leadership training, helping the police department reinstate their DARE program. It can be a whole host of different items, but we've also focused on retraining our workforce through non-traditional scholarships, which we've given 75 of throughout the years. Also committing, $7,000 or $8,000 a year to workforce enhancement scholarship. So think of that CNA that's pushing their training further. Our focus today has continued to evolve over time. It's still investing in people, but we've doubled down on empowering youth. So as we look at our endowment payout, we're granting $40,000 per year maybe 50, depending on how fundraising goes. But our youth advisory committee has direct control over 20% of that. So we're not just asking for the input from the youth, but we're empowering them to make the difference that they want to make. I cannot stress the importance of that, and that resonates with donors as we reach towards the transfer of wealth goals for Nebraska City. So about $228 million is a transfer of wealth in Nebraska City. 5% of that over a 10-year period would be 11.4 million. Next slide, please. And, ooh, I got to move this box. Here we go. So today we have 2.7 million in assets and only 1.3 million of that is endowed. However, through our focus on collaboration, creating partnerships within the city, we've reinvested $5.3 million into the community, and we're pretty darn proud of that. We have some big goals moving forward. Thinking through what those big goals are, our projects now largely align with trying to break the cycle of poverty in Nebraska City. And that is a massive undertaking. It spans all different areas of the community, but we're optimistic that we're going to make progress. A great example of that is every student K through 4th grade right now gets read to once a month by a community volunteer and gets to take the book home. Simple things, but you don't make progress without making small steps. Another goal of ours to reach that 10-year transfer of wealth number is to focus on planned giving. So currently we have 25 planned gifts, and our goal over the next 5 years is to increase that to 100. The progress and small things that we've done along the way is incredibly beneficial to having those planned giving conversations. So a couple of key takeaways. I don't want to take up too much time here. One of the things that we've always struggled with and have had to get over is letting perfection get in the way of progress. We need to be okay with good and great, and not everything has to be perfect. We just need to keep moving forward. And the other thing I'd like to emphasize, Nebraska City, SHICKLEY, and Keith County, who you'll hear from next, are not unique. We are just a sampling of the communities all across the NCF network. We're blessed to be able to share our story with you today. And Jeff could have picked pretty much any community on that map and had a similar experience today. So thank you for your time.
Keel, thank you so much. One of the things we would really encourage people to do is, if you do have questions for myself or any of these speakers, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And then we'll be getting to those as we go along later, unless it's something really simple that we can cover while we're talking here. So Keel, thanks. The next person that's going to join us this afternoon is Pam Abbott. Pam's currently the current vice chair of the Nebraska Community Foundation statewide board of directors. She's also the chairperson of the Keith County Foundation Fund in West Central Nebraska. So we tried to bring you different communities. This is a countywide fund, not just one community. So all of these different funds get set up based upon how the community thinks of itself, how that economy works, what makes the most sense in local context. Pam has a really inspiring story of the great work they've done over time and how that great work leads to more great things. So Pam, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff, and greetings to everyone. Well, Keith County is a great example, I would have to say, of the unexpected. We have a population, as you can see, of about 8,300 people. We are countywide, like Jeff said, and that encompasses about 5 communities. My community is the largest at about 5,000 in population. We're at the west end of the state, as you can see, which is in context about 2.5 hours east of Denver. And we tout being the #2 in tourist attraction at in Keith County due to a very large recreational lake that also is utilized obviously for irrigation and hydroelectricity. So we can go from being a town of 5,000 in the fall and the winter to a town of about 30 to 35,000 in the summertime. While our fund was established or affiliated in 2000 with the Nebraska Community Foundation, I want to fast forward a little bit and start my story in about 2015, 2016. We had an endowment at that time of about $1.3 million, and we had an opportunity to grow our endowment by about $750,000 by participating in a 2-to-1 match that was sponsored by another state foundation. We accomplished two things with that opportunity, obviously to grow our endowment. And by growing our endowment to a little over $2 million, that increased our payouts to about $90,000 each year in our granting year. They were formerly about $40,000. And then also the second thing we accomplished is just, probably more importantly, was just to continue to develop and grow trust with the existing relationships and partnerships that we had. And we wanted to develop and grow new ones throughout this process. So that was our number one goal. We reached our goal by the third year, about 2019, because this encompassed about 4 years, and that was a blessing for us. Next. Because having participated in that campaign helped our fund members prepare for a completely unexpected gift of $8.3 million in 2019. That generous homegrown Keith County ag producer left us a gift with no restrictions. And our affiliated fund certainly decided immediately that we would endow that kind of money. So our current endowed assets are about almost 13 million, as you can see. Our unrestricted endowment assets are still about $12 million. And so far, we've reinvested about $2 million into our community. Next. Since 2019, we have connected so many dots, and we continue to do so. That success has bred success with this active giving and more. Our conversations have grown to more impactful areas for granting funds to. A few major action planning events have occurred since then. One of them is we've revisited our mission, vision, and values statement. We've done some asset mapping, including a data dig about our people and our economy, certainly our education. And then we've held community visioning sessions that have allowed people to truly dream about what would help us thrive even more now and, more importantly, into the future. With those visioning sessions, we held about 4 of them over the period of 2020, 3 common themes actually were consistent in all of those separate visioning sessions. The first one was providing affordable housing. The second was addressing a need for quality and capacity in early childhood and education. And the third one was first impressions of our area, which included better wayfinding, green space, and incorporating the arts within our community, the visual arts within our community. Next. So did the transfer of study have any bearing on that event? Absolutely. In hindsight, our transfer of wealth study for our area helped us deliver powerful communication messages through data that in turn helped us as a fund create a greater sense of mission. And our conversations with members in our communities that we lifted were things like the amount of wealth that was estimated to be transferred in our county alone, something that we grossly underestimate, I think. And the second thing was to help remind ourselves and our community about the power of an endowment for our place, certainly the sustainability. And number 3, it helped better define a tool for communicating things that we hear in narratives across our nation, certainly local control and voices, for what we need. Of course, leaving a portion of our wealth empowers our communities, especially in our rural areas. And as community members, we know what's important for our communities to adapt and to ultimately thrive. That data dig that we did confirmed those things, and it opened our eyes to a few things as well. But we know that when something's personal, it's important, and when it's important, it gets done. Our endowment this year is going to pay out roughly $400,000. That's the change over just a short period of time. Those types of grant giving events now have actually, we're looking into multi-year, major impactful things in those 3 areas that I mentioned earlier. Next, excuse me, stay on that one, go back. Let's just stay on that one, Carrie. We know that we have many, many gifts on the books since that time. Next. And these are only, those expectancies are only the known amounts that we have. We know that we have others, as we're told by estate planners in our area. But fortunately, we have met 97% of our 10-year transfer of wealth goal, as you can see there. So that was completely unexpected. I think probably if you were to ask me for any advice, or any of my FAC members, I think I speak for them. Don't underestimate the invisible. Keep building and maintaining trust with your partners and community members by keeping them in the center of the dreaming. There are a lot of gems standing in the margins waiting for an invitation from you. And the trust that lies within your relationships, I think, are your true north. The money will follow, and that was spoken about earlier today. Your actions are going to spark attention, and it's going to interest potential donors, and you're not going to realize they're watching, but trust me, they are. And certainly the boots on the ground are your catalyst. Thank you.
Oh, Pam, thank you. That was wonderful. Incredibly inspiring. One of the things I would ask folks is, if you're not on mute, if you would be so kind as to mute yourself, and that way we don't have feedback. So Richard's going to close us off here with a couple slides to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll do some Q&A. Richard?
Okay, the transfer of wealth is a unique opportunity. Some of the bullet points on that is the transfer of wealth allows us to build philanthropy and endowments. It also proves that capital is not a limiting resource to community development, and it helps us achieve sustainability by using asset-based community development. And the key point, it helps us break out of a cycle of dependency. A friend of mine who's a banker in a neighboring town has a story he's told over and over, and I've included in my presentations when I give them, because I think it is so impactful. He said that he was tired of people dying in the community. There'd be a funeral at 10 o'clock in the morning. After the funeral and the interment, there'd be a funeral dinner. And then after the funeral dinner, the children and grandchildren will come into the bank, cash in all the CDs, and the last he saw the money was the taillights heading out of town. And he thought that this would be a tremendous opportunity if we could keep that, some of that money at least, locally, invested locally. And that is basically the basis of our unrestricted endowments. Next. So the message is for all of you to remember and take back to your communities. Once our wealth leaves the community, it's gone forever. Once our wealth is endowed in our community, it is here forever. The time to act is now. The opportunity will never be greater. And one last point, you need to ask. A little 3-letter word is very, very important in this, and you have to ask. If you ask, the people will respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And if we can, is it possible to bring up myself and our other three speakers on the gallery view on the right-hand side? Sarah, is that possible to do? Pam, Keel, Richard, thank you all so much. That was just terrific and really delighted to be able to share those stories with everybody. I want to share one quick thing as it relates to some of the questions that got put in the chat, and then go ahead and open it up for questions or people to be able to respond to questions that are in the chat. So Pam said, when it's personal, it's important. When it's important, it gets done. So I grew up in a little community of Red Cloud, which is on the Nebraska-Kansas border, about 1,000 people. I'm the sixth of 6 children. What my parents have chosen to do is to treat our hometown as a 7th child. So as opposed to 5%, they're treating our hometown as a 7th child because there were 2 of them and 6 of us. So it took a village, and this was their small way of saying thank you. So I think there's lots of different ways of expressing the idea that the transfer of wealth helps us to really embrace the abundance that exists in our home places. And then there's plenty to go around. So we have plenty of money to support our children and our heirs. We also have plenty of money to support our hometowns and all of the iterations that they will take now and into the future. Aaron, Sarah, Chris, are there particular things that you guys know you want to bring up as it relates to your Innovia constituency in our last few minutes?
Yeah, you know, Jeff, one thing I'll just comment on, there were a couple of questions about endowment giving versus outright gifts. I really appreciate that the panelists each talked about both. And maybe one of you could address how you've emphasized both the power of current giving in your transfer of wealth studies while also really celebrating and elevating the importance of endowments. And then maybe, Jeff, you could just touch on real quickly a reminder of the relationship that Nebraska Community Foundation has with your local affiliates, and your understanding of what Innovia is doing locally to replicate that local community endowment model with our model. And I can add to that as well to address the great question by Christina in the chat box. Thank you.
Jeff, mind if I jump in on the gifting one?
Please do, Keel.
Great. So the split between endowment givers or project specific givers, or say annual mission givers, varies by community. In Nebraska City, our practice is when we visit with a donor, we ask for all 3. You're not going to get all 3. That's a slam dunk. But what's wrong with saying, hey, these are all the different ways to give? What fits your situation best? It's a lot easier to change a beneficiary designation and make a planned gift than to write a check for some people. Others are more drawn to tangible, specific projects, and others are more drawn to the endowment. So there's no hard set rule, but you don't want to eliminate 1 or 2 and only focus on one.
Thanks, Keel. And one thing I'll just add from what we know thus far in this work in our region is that, frankly, outright gifts are already the most commonly understood ways for people to be generous in a region like ours. So what I appreciate about the emphasis that the 3 of you have placed on endowments is that this is really important to educate our community about those. We also know that endowment giving accesses the deeper reservoir of the way that most people tend to hold their wealth. People are going to continue to give outright gifts to campaigns and nonprofits. It's really important for folks across a region like ours to understand that through a 5% campaign and through a charitable planned gift, they can build an endowment that will create that ongoing legacy of funding for their community or their favorite nonprofits. So I appreciate the fact that each of you emphasize that.
I think the other element of this that's key for rural places is, as rural people, I think it's fair to say we're all habitual. We're not fickle, we're habitual. Much of what we're trying to do through the Nebraska Community Foundation and through all of our affiliated funds is to help community leaders to create an even better set of habits. So it's giving to things that aren't just relief, it's giving to things that are relief and development. It's really thinking about empowering future generations to have discretion, because we don't know what the opportunities and the challenges of the future will be. So it's how do we think about this, not just within the money, but primarily within the behavior and the attitude of how does a tool like philanthropic giving really help us to build and enhance the culture that we already have in our home place.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, I'll comment real quickly on one of the questions that I see from Mark Havens. Mark has asked about whether transfer of wealth data for our region can be provided for local counties. And the answer is yes. We have all the data available. It's on our website. Sarah can drop in the link to the 5% landing page, and you can link from there to the individual county by county data. Jeff, I'm wondering if you are the panelist, or maybe Deb, you might be one of the best folks to speak to the question from John Norsteg, who asked about farmland, production agricultural land, those kinds of assets, and how those can be a part of a 5% campaign like this in a region like ours.
Jeff, do you want to start with the Nebraska Community Foundation, and then I'll mention a different approach to that. But Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure.
You all do farmland.
So one of the things that is really important to think about is what we're trying to do is empower communities to have greater control of their destiny. And one of the really important things to remember is that a company town always exists because somebody outside of that place owns most of the assets. So it's all about sort of what are all the things we can do to create and sustain indigenous ownership. But one of the things that happens is there are farm families where there's nobody in the next generation that decides they want to farm. So that money, you know, that land may get gifted. Hopefully it gets sold back to another local farm or ranch family. But in many cases, there's huge capital gains in that agriculture, in that agricultural land. So gifting it may be more tax-wise than giving it to the next generation. So it just all depends upon the tax implications of the asset, how much capital gains are built up there, et cetera, et cetera. You always want to gift your most tax-laden assets and give your least tax-laden assets to your heirs. So those are all things that we help people sort of work through. And we're constantly encouraging people to think about, okay, what are the things we can do to localize or relocalize services, industry, et cetera. Deb, you wanted to speak to that too?
I'll drop this in the chat. I have to go out and find the link, but I'll drop this in the chat. The Southwest Initiative Foundation, a community foundation in Minnesota, has a program they call Keep It Growing, where they actually accept donations of farmland, but they keep it in production agriculture. They manage the land. They often are leasing it out to younger farmers and providing a stream of income to the existing farm owners. So I'll make sure it gets into the chat, because it's a different way than just taking a piece of it and liquidating it. It's a way, as Jeff said, to actually root that wealth and keep the ag as an important, viable sector in the community. So thank you, Laura, for doing that.
Thank you, Deb, for that great answer. And I'll just add, as we get to the top of the hour here, and I know that there are folks that will need to jump away, we're going to keep the line open. We'll continue to address questions in the chat box, but if folks need to jump away, of course, feel free to do that. Deb, I'm really glad that you mentioned the Southwest Initiative Foundation. They've actually been a great resource to us at Innovia already, and we are planning for a workshop later this spring to include them, to share some of those stories about how they built that program and how they marketed it to folks that have created and hold much of their wealth in production farmland or timberland or forest land. So we believe that for a region like ours is a really important opportunity. So thank you, John, for the question. And actually, John, we're going to be inviting you to join that session as well, maybe even as a panelist, given your experience and background in that. I know, again, some folks need to jump away, but I'd like to get to a couple more of these questions if our panelists have time. A question from Mary Selecki up in our Tri-County area is really about, with so many organizations asking for donations, How, Pam and Richard and Keel, did you talk about your fund in a way that set it apart? And maybe Jeff, real quickly to you as well, how did the Nebraska Community Foundation as a statewide entity support that through marketing, data, ways to support that publicity in the local communities about the impact of those local funds?
Well, and I think that I will put out a philosophical element and then ask Richard and Keel and Pam to respond to that. One of the really important elements of an abundance approach and an asset-based approach is to not think of yourself as being in competition with others. There's plenty to go around. These are all worthwhile community building efforts. Different donors have different wants and desires. I think it comes back to the issue that Richard brought up, which is the most important thing we can do is invite people into the conversation and find that if their interests align with another group that we're familiar with, we connect them. Because the more people are connected, the more they're going to do. So Keel, Pam, Richard, what insights do you guys have to share on that one?
Well, I'd agree with what you said, Jeff. We're not in competition. In fact, we help one another. And a good example here in Shickley, if you talk to the ministers of the churches, church giving has went up in the last 10 years. And part of that is telling the story of Shickley and getting people interested in Shickley, knowing what Shickley has to offer, what Shickley has accomplished. And it's a great place to raise a family. It's helped everybody. So you're not taking money out of your left pocket and putting in your right pocket. That's not the game. But it's a cooperation deal. We work with all those. We work with the schools. We work with our county ag society for the county fair. We work with our county hospital. It's all hands on deck and everybody helping everybody else.
Sorry, I would add to that. I spoke to connecting those dots earlier, especially with our community visioning sessions that we did. And within those visioning sessions, we identified what our needs were, and then we started asking ourselves who's doing some of the work in these areas. And then we became more focused and invited everyone to the table that was doing the work. And together we're reducing those silos because we're working to toward one goal, whatever that goal is in those specific areas. And that's helped us hugely to certainly not compete, but to be a partner, just to be a partner in everything we're doing.
Great, thank you. You know, one thing I'd just like to add on this, and then Keel, if you wanted to add anything else to those comments, for Innovia Foundation's part, our 5% transfer of wealth campaign is including both a strategy to develop local community endowments, just like the 3 that have been spotlighted here. And I saw the comments from Mary and Barry Bacon about creating a local community fund. You have one. You have a tri-county community endowment that was started by your leadership council. So the opportunity for all of you that live up in Colville and Chewelah in Ferry County is to be a part of helping to publicize that fund and add to it. And the goal is that it will benefit local nonprofits with a perpetual source of grant dollars as that fund grows and begins to distribute out. But the other piece that I want to also mention is that a second part of our strategy for Innovia Foundation is that we're involving every nonprofit across our region to push out this 5% campaign and the transfer of wealth data. So it isn't just about community endowments like those that have been spotlighted here in our region. It's also about the opportunity for universities, hospital foundations, local nonprofits, and grassroots organizations to take part in this campaign and to attract 5% planned gifts to their organizations, either for their own endowments or for whatever the donor's intent may be to support that local nonprofit. And I really appreciated, Jeff, your comment about what your folks did and viewing the community as a 7th Yost, What a cool idea. We've heard that from some of our local universities, that they're beginning to talk to their alumni in that same way. Would you consider Eastern Washington or Whitworth, or fill in the blank with your favorite nonprofit as another one of your children as you do your estate planning? That can be a really powerful way for folks who care deeply about their community to ensure that that wealth stays local. And Richard, I really appreciated the way you noted that in your summary remarks, that once the wealth leaves, it's gone forever. But this is an opportunity for us to reinvest and retain some of that wealth to benefit our communities for the long term. So thank you. Jeff, did you see any other questions in the chat box that you or the panelists could jump in and answer? We are at the end of our time here, but I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else you'd like to say, or any of the panelists.
We really appreciate the opportunity to share. We hope this was helpful to all of you. We're always learning. So thank you for the opportunity to learn from all of you. And the high tide raises all ships, even though we're all landlocked here. The high tide does raise all ships. So
wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Deb, any closing remarks from you?
The only thing I would say is it's so encouraging to me to listen to this, because this is a true community leadership story for you all in philanthropy. And I just think that's such an important facet of this work. This isn't just about going out and building endowment or capturing money. This is about the leadership you're providing in your communities to create the resources and to direct those resources in the way that really matter for your community. So just wonderful to hear all the Nebraska stories again, and good luck to Innovia and to all of you as community leaders in the work that lies ahead. We expect to hear good things from all of you in the next year.
Thank you, Deb. Pam or Richard or Keel, any parting word from the three of you?
I would just say, if anybody has any questions, you have our contact information. We're more than willing to help in any way we can.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and we wish you well.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. In the last minute here, I just want to share my screen before we close out. And I do want to note that we will keep the line open after we formally conclude. But just to give all of it, those of you on the call, a sense of what the next steps are for us at Innovia. Today's workshop was the formal launch of our 5% campaign in our region, and we are really excited about it. And our launch includes a 5% campaign as well. How can we capitalize on the transfer of wealth in our region and encourage people to invest 5% because they are fully committed to this place? And you can see our tagline there, 5% invested, fully committed. And our goal is that between now and the end of June, we will do an initial wave of the 5% campaign. We've already elicited and mobilized hundreds of nonprofits, community leaders, and over 700 professional advisors, estate planning attorneys, wealth advisors, and CPAs across our region, so that everyone is aware of this data and the opportunity to inspire people across our region to plan now to invest 5% back into their communities. The call to action for all of you that would like to participate is really very straightforward. As you've been inspired by Richard and Pam and Keel and Jeff and the stories from Nebraska, would you join us? We have local leadership councils, over 130 volunteers from each of the communities across our region that are already working with Innovia to build local community endowments. We invite you to join us in that work. We also invite you to use the collateral that we've developed about the 5% campaign, share it out on your social media, reach out to your favorite nonprofit or professional advisor in your community, or another neighbor or friend who cares about your community, and share that information. Sarah's going to drop that into the chat box, and we'll be sending it out to all of you as a follow-up to our call today. And then finally, we ask for your feedback. The launch of our campaign today is just the beginning of this. And I appreciated Jeff and the three panelists that you talked about this as something that's iterative. It happens over many, many years. This isn't a, we have 1 year to do this work. We're going to be in this together for many years. And so join us by letting us know, how is the 5% campaign being received? What's working? What could be improved? And as we plan for future waves, we would invite your involvement and your feedback. And again, please feel free to call any of us at Innovia Foundation if you have questions and want to be involved. I'm going to take one more look in the chat box here to make sure there aren't any other questions. We will leave the line open, but we are officially concluded. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Thank you, team from the state of Nebraska. You inspired us. And thank you, Deb, for all of your great partnership and insights along the way. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. We appreciate your time and hope you will join us in launching this 5% campaign to transform communities across our region here in Eastern Washington and North Idaho. So thank you and have a great day.